Elias fired first. The enforcer crumpled to the ground in a cloud of sparks, the blaster shot ripping through his chest. A satisfying thud echoed in the small corridor as the body hit the cold metal floor. Elias didn't waste a second. He ducked behind the nearest pillar, taking cover as the second enforcer fired back, his shot searing the air with lethal precision. The first few blasts missed, but Elias knew the enforcer was just setting up for a deadly ambush. Heart racing, Elias peered around the pillar, eyes locking on the second enforcer's position. He'd fought these soldiers before, well-trained, ruthless. But they weren't invincible. The Empire's enforcers were a force, but even they underestimated human adaptability. Elias knew how to use his environment to his advantage, how to get inside their heads and make them second-guess their every move. The enforcer fired again. This time, Elias moved. A sharp roll to the left, a quick sprint to the opposite side of the corridor. And then he popped out, firing as he ran. The shot hit its mark, right in the enforcer's shoulder. He howled in pain, dropping his blaster, but quickly reached for another weapon, a combat knife. Elias didn't give him the chance to close the gap. Another shot rang out, this one hitting the enforcer square in the chest. He collapsed with a wet gurgle, his knife clattering across the floor. Elias exhaled slowly, wiping the sweat from his brow. 2 down, but there was no time to waste. The rest of the squad would be here soon, and he needed to move, needed to escape the city before the whole Empire came crashing down on him. He quickly retrieved his blaster, checking its power cells before darting toward the stairwell that led down to the maintenance tunnels. The city above was in chaos, with the planet's power grid failing and Imperial forces scrambling to regain control. The streets were a war zone. Elias could hear the distant thrum of Imperial hovercraft patrolling the skies, their searchlights scanning every corner of the city. As he descended into the damp, dark corridors below, the sounds of battle grew distant, replaced by the eerie silence of the tunnels. This was where he would disappear, where his plan could take root. But Elias wasn't alone. A voice crackled through his earpiece. "You're alive," it said, the voice rough, but unmistakable. It was Rhea, his old comrade, the hacker who'd helped him out of more sticky situations than he could count. "I saw the explosions, Drake. I thought you were toast." Elias couldn't help but grin, despite the gravity of the situation. "I've got a talent for surviving," he muttered. "But I need help. I've got something big here. Meet me at the usual spot, Rhea. I'll explain everything." "Got it. But you're not alone anymore. We've got eyes on you." Elias's grin faded. He knew what that meant. The rebellion was already stirring. And if they were watching him, then they were ready to act. That was the spark he'd been waiting for, the catalyst for something bigger than himself. "I'll be there soon," Elias said, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. He turned toward the shadows, knowing that whatever lay ahead would either break him or make him. Either way, the Empire was in for a fight they weren't prepared for. The rebels had been waiting for Elias when he arrived at their hidden base, a rundown warehouse deep in the forgotten industrial sector, far from the Empire's prying eyes. Rhea, a wiry woman with wild hair and sharp eyes, was already in front of a console, fingers flying over the keys. Her sharp gaze flicked up when Elias entered, and she gave him a tight nod. "You made it," she said, her voice steady despite the chaotic circumstances. "We've been tracking Empire movements all night. They're sending in more enforcers. They're tightening the noose." Elias glanced around the dimly lit room, taking in the ragtag group that had gathered. Most of them were humans, mercenaries, ex-soldiers, or civilians who had grown tired of seeing their families suffer under the Empire's boot. But there were others too. Aliens who had fled Imperial control, bringing with them stories of oppression from every corner of the galaxy. It was a mixed group, full of misfits and broken people. But together, they had become something more. A loose coalition of outcasts who had finally found a cause worth fighting for. "We've been operating in the shadows," Elias, Rhea said, turning back to her screen. "But the Empire is coming for us. They won't stop until they stamp us out." "You're wrong," Elias replied, his voice low but filled with an intensity that made Rhea pause. "We're done hiding. The Empire's been toying with us for too long. We have a weapon now, something they don't expect." Rhea narrowed her eyes. "What weapon?" Elias pulled the artifact from his jacket and placed it on the table. The room went silent as the group gathered around it, their eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and awe. The device, with its alien inscriptions and sleek design, seemed out of place here, like it had belonged to a different time, a different galaxy. "This is more than a relic," Elias said, his fingers brushing the cold surface. "It's a map of our past, a map to our true strength. We've been slaves long enough, kept in the dark by the Empire. But they made a mistake. They didn't destroy everything." Rhea leaned forward, studying the artifact. "Where does it lead?" "To a weapons facility," Elias said, his voice hard. "One that was built by our ancestors. It's humanity's lost legacy, and it's buried somewhere on this planet. The Empire doesn't know it exists, but once we find it, we'll have the power to fight back." "For real?" The rebels exchanged uncertain glances, but the spark of hope was in their eyes now. Rhea stood up slowly, her fingers dancing over the console as she accessed a hidden database. "I can trace the coordinates," she said, voice steady, "but we'll need to be quick. The Empire won't leave us alone after this. They'll be sending in every enforcer they've got." Elias's jaw clenched. He knew what that meant, a full-scale assault. The Empire would bring everything they had to bear on them. But it didn't matter anymore. The fight wasn't just about survival. It was about taking back everything the Empire had stolen. "We move tonight," Elias said, the words hard and final. "We get the weapon, and we use it. No more running." Rhea looked up from the console, her expression serious. "You're sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." With that, the room came alive. The rebels immediately began preparing, gathering gear, coordinating shifts, checking weapons. Elias stood at the center of it all, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no illusions about the risk. This mission could get them all killed, but they didn't have a choice. The Empire was too powerful, too entrenched in every corner of the galaxy. But humanity's spark had been lit, and Elias was determined to make sure it burned bright enough to bring the Empire down. The mission was set. By the time the first rays of dawn broke through the city's polluted skyline, Elias and his team were already moving. Their destination, a hidden Imperial research facility buried deep beneath the surface, camouflaged beneath layers of reinforced concrete and advanced cloaking technology. Rhea had cracked the coordinates from the artifact, revealing the location of the lost weapon. Now, it was a race against time. As they approached the underground entrance, Elias felt the weight of what they were about to uncover. The Empire had buried Earth's legacy, hiding the truths of humanity's past from the galaxy. The artifact wasn't just a key to a weapon. It was a key to understanding what humans had once been, the undisputed rulers of the stars. The mere thought made his blood run cold. How had they been reduced to this? How had they gone from masters of the galaxy to enslaved pawns in someone else's war? His mind was distracted when Rhea's voice crackled through his comm. "We're in," she said, her tone sharp. "This place is bigger than I thought. It's not just a weapons facility. There are records here, old tech, things the Empire didn't want anyone finding. If we get our hands on it, we'll know everything." Elias's heart skipped. "Everything. Everything," Rhea confirmed. Humanity's real history, the Empire's origins, and the truth about the weapon. They descended into the depths of the facility, moving through dark, narrow corridors that smelled of old steel and something metallic, almost blood-like. The deeper they went, the more the atmosphere seemed to hum with an eerie, almost unnatural energy. The air grew thick with tension, as if the very walls of the facility were holding their breath, waiting for something to awaken. Elias led the group, his instincts on high alert. The Empire had to know this place was compromised by now. Even with Rhea's technical skills, they couldn't count on staying undetected forever. But the deeper they went, the more the hum of the facility seemed to vibrate through his bones. Suddenly, Rhea's voice broke through his thoughts again. "Wait. I found something. You need to see this." They arrived at a massive chamber filled with holographic displays and containment pods suspended in the air. But what caught Elias's attention was the enormous databank at the center of the room, its surface covered in human symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. "This is it," Elias said, his voice barely a whisper. This is where it all started. Rhea was already accessing the databank, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. "This is a trove of data. Galactic histories, genetic archives. It's about Earth. About what we used to be." As Rhea sifted through the information, Elias felt a cold chill run down his spine. The first of the human records flickered on the screen, and the truth hit him like a punch to the gut. The Empire had been founded by a race of alien conquerors, but their true objective wasn't just to dominate the galaxy. They had sought out humanity, not to exterminate them, but to enslave them. The early human empire had been vast, its technological prowess beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity had been the architects of star systems, the creators of unimaginable weapons, and the builders of civilizations spread across 100 worlds. But that was before the Elthra, the Empire's founders, had discovered Earth's dangerous potential. The Empire had killed, imprisoned, or altered humanity's greatest minds, erasing their histories, altering their genetics, and preventing any of their old knowledge from passing into the hands of future generations. Elias's eyes narrowed as the holographic display shifted to a long-forgotten human project, Project Genesis. The project had been an attempt to harness human DNA to create the ultimate weapon, something capable of bending the very fabric of space and time. It was a weapon so powerful it could tear the galaxy apart. "Jesus," Elias muttered under his breath. "They never stopped experimenting on us." Rhea's fingers hovered over the console, her voice trembling. "Elias, they didn't just erase history. They buried our power." For the first time, Elias understood the full scope of what was at stake. The weapon wasn't just an artifact. It was the key to unlocking humanity's latent abilities, the raw potential hidden in their DNA, waiting to be awakened. And the Empire, despite all their might, had never fully controlled it. But that didn't mean they wouldn't try. "Get what you need, Rhea," Elias said, his voice hard. "We're not leaving here empty-handed." Before Rhea could respond, a loud crash echoed down the corridor, followed by the unmistakable hum of Imperial Enforcers' combat suits. The facility had just become a death trap. "Time's up," Elias growled. "Move." The sound of armored boots pounding down the hallways reached Elias's ears just as Rhea finished uploading the data to a secure drive. They were running out of time. Less than a minute, maybe two, before the Empire's enforcers reached their position. Elias turned to his crew, his voice low but urgent. "Rhea, how long until you've got everything?" "I'm done," Rhea replied, her fingers flying over the console. "The data's secured. We can go." "Good. Then let's move." They didn't have to be told twice. The rebels snapped into action, grabbing their weapons and hustling toward the rear exit. Elias's heart pounded in his chest. He had thought that getting the data would be the hard part, but now they had to escape, and the Empire wasn't about to let them walk out the door. A muffled explosion rattled the walls, followed by the sharp crackle of Imperial blasters. They were getting closer. "Here they come," shouted Marcus, one of the rebels. A tall, stocky man with a deep voice and a ruthless streak. Marcus had been with Elias from the start, and he'd never flinched in the face of danger. "We need to take the back corridors." Elias nodded. The facility's maintenance tunnels were their best shot at avoiding the full force of the Empire's response. They had to get to the surface before Imperial reinforcements arrived. Every second counted. They sprinted down a narrow corridor, the sound of their boots echoing in the tight space. Behind them, the air was alive with the shrill wail of alarms. The facility's lights flickered, and Elias could feel the pulse of energy surging through the walls as the Empire activated lockdown protocols. "Seal the doors," Rhea shouted as she sprinted ahead, tapping a sequence on her wrist console. "Not fast enough," Elias barked, glancing back. A squad of Imperial enforcers emerged from the shadows, their combat armor glinting in the dim emergency lights. The soldiers were armed and ready, blasters raised. Without thinking, Elias slid to a stop, spun, and fired. The shot tore through the lead enforcer's helmet, sending him sprawling to the ground. But there were too many, and they were closing in fast. He could hear their heavy breathing through their masks, their boots clanking against the cold steel floor. "Go," Elias yelled, shoving Rhea forward. "I'll hold them off." "No," Rhea snapped, her eyes wild. "We fight as a team, or none of us get out of here." Before he could argue, the rest of the crew moved into position, flanking the enforcers. A brief, deadly firefight erupted in the corridor, the sound of blaster fire filling the air. Elias shot another enforcer, then ducked as the next round barely missed his head. He returned fire, his mind already planning the next move. The enforcers were trained, but they weren't prepared for the guerrilla tactics the rebels had honed over months of skirmishes. Elias's pulse quickened as the data started to shift in his mind. The information Rhea had uncovered had been far more than just the location of humanity's ancient weapon. The data had unlocked a deeper truth, something buried beneath centuries of Empire lies. Humanity's dormant powers weren't just about their genetics. They were about the energy of their will, their ability to shape reality itself. The Empire had hidden that potential because they feared it. But Elias had always suspected there was more to humanity than what the Empire had allowed them to believe. Now he was starting to understand how deep that power went. One of the enforcers lunged at him, blaster raised. Without thinking, Elias reached out, instinctively pulling on something inside him, a force that wasn't entirely physical, but something more. He felt the air shift around him, a strange, crackling energy charging through his body, and with a snap of his mind, he sent the enforcer flying backward, slamming him into the wall with a sickening thud. Rhea's eyes went wide, and she stopped dead in her tracks. What the hell was that? Later, Elias growled, firing again. He didn't have time to process it himself. His body was acting on instinct. He wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. He was fighting to unleash humanity's true power. The rebels pressed forward, pushing through the enforcers in a storm of blaster fire and movement. They fought like a unit, their actions synchronized and precise, their collective will focused on one thing: survival. As the last enforcer crumpled to the floor, Elias didn't even pause to catch his breath. "We're not done yet. We've got a war to win." They ran, fast and hard, through the labyrinth of corridors toward the surface. Elias could feel the weight of the ancient knowledge they now carried with them, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. They needed to awaken the rest of humanity's power. They needed to be more than rebels. They needed to become a revolution that the Empire couldn't stop. And for the first time, Elias was sure they could do it. They emerged into the daylight, the stark, artificial sunlight of Earth's capital city filtering through the thick clouds of pollution. Elias squinted against the glare, his mind still racing. They had made it out of the facility, but that was just the beginning. The data they carried was explosive, literally and figuratively, and if they couldn't make it to their extraction point without being intercepted, everything would have been for nothing. The city's skyline loomed ahead, a jagged silhouette against the grim horizon. But in the distance, Elias could already see the telltale flash of Imperial patrols, their drones soaring through the sky like vultures. The Empire was aware of their escape, and reinforcements were on their way. It wouldn't be long before the entire city was swarming with enforcers. "We're not gonna make it to the extraction point in time," Rhea said, her voice tight with urgency as she studied her wrist console. "They've got us surrounded." Elias's eyes narrowed. They were in the open, and there was no cover, no place to hide. The only choice was to run, but it wasn't about just running anymore. Elias had felt the strange surge of energy inside him, an untapped potential, when he had repelled the enforcer in the tunnels. And now, in the heat of the moment, with their lives on the line, he felt it again. That power was still there, simmering just beneath the surface. The question was, could he control it? "We need to draw them away," Elias said, his voice calm despite the rising tension. "Create a distraction so we can get to the extraction point." "How?" Marcus asked, his face tense. "We don't have the firepower for a full assault." "We don't need firepower," Elias replied. His eyes gleamed with a determination that wasn't just born of desperation. It was born of understanding. "We have something more powerful than that." Rhea raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "What do you mean?" "I'm talking about the power the Empire tried to suppress," Elias said, the words coming faster now as the realization hit him. "They buried it in our genes, in the very DNA of every human alive. But the artifact, the data, it's unlocking it. I can feel it." There was a long silence as the others exchanged uncertain glances, the weight of Elias's words hanging in the air like a storm cloud. "Are you telling us you can control this power?" Rhea asked slowly, her voice tinged with doubt. "I'm not sure," Elias admitted, his gaze fixed on the Imperial drones that hovered closer with each passing second. "But I have to try." Before anyone could protest, he stepped forward, out into the open. The wind howled through the crumbling streets as Elias squared his shoulders, feeling the energy inside him rise. It wasn't just the power of his own will, it was something deeper, something primal. It was as though the planet itself was awakening, its ancient, untapped forces aligning with his intent. Elias extended his arms, palms facing outward, and closed his eyes, focusing on the connection between himself and the world around him. He reached down, deeper than he had ever gone before, and felt the crackling energy surge through him, connecting him to the very fabric of reality. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then, with a fierce shout, Elias pushed outward, focusing every ounce of his will on the drones above them. The air seemed to shimmer and bend, and with a sudden, deafening roar, the nearest Imperial craft exploded, sending debris scattering through the air. Rhea gasped. What the hell was that? The remaining drones veered off, but not for long. They had detected the disturbance. More enforcers would be on their way now. But Elias's mind was buzzing, the energy inside him still crackling like a live wire. He had done it. He didn't know how, but he had tapped into something far beyond his understanding. And he wasn't finished yet. "I don't know what I just did," Elias muttered, his breath coming heavy as the others gathered around him. "But it's only a matter of time before we're swarmed. We need to move now." Marcus was the first to recover from the shock, his expression hardening. "You created a damn explosion with your mind, Elias. We're not stopping now." Elias shook his head, still stunned by the sheer power that had surged through him. "We're not just running anymore. We're changing the game." Rhea's eyes burned with the fire of resolve. "Then let's finish what we started." The team began moving again, this time with a renewed sense of purpose. They knew the Empire would be relentless, but they also knew that something had shifted. The power Elias had unlocked was a game changer. Now they had more than just stolen data. They had the means to challenge the Empire itself. But Elias also understood that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and dangerous, and the Empire wouldn't let go of their grip without a fight. The truth about humanity's potential had been hidden for too long, but it was time to stop hiding. They were no longer outlaws. They were the spark of a revolution. The streets of the city seemed to grow darker with every step they took, the looming shadow of the Empire closing in. Elias could feel it in his bones, the weight of the coming storm. The data they carried had sent ripples through the galaxy, and already the Empire had begun to tighten its grip. They wouldn't stop until they had every last rebel wiped out. But Elias knew something the Empire didn't. They were no longer just a scattered group of insurgents. They were the spark of something much larger. As they approached their extraction point, a crumbling building hidden in the lower levels of the city, Elias could see the Imperial forces moving through the streets, their patrols tighter than ever. The drones above hovered in an ominous arc, scanning every alley, every shadow, and sending out pulse signals that bathed the area in a cold blue light. It was only a matter of time before they were discovered. "Elias," Rhea whispered, her voice sharp with tension. "The drones will spot us if we don't move fast." "We don't have much of a choice," Elias replied, his eyes scanning the city's skyline. "But I have an idea." "Great," Marcus muttered, checking his blaster. "Do I even want to know?" "We're going to force their hand," Elias said. His tone was calm, almost unnervingly so. He had felt the power surge inside him again, the energy he hadn't fully understood, but instinctively knew how to use. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was becoming something else. The power the Empire had tried to suppress was awakening in him, and with it, he could feel the pulse of the earth, the hum of energy flowing beneath his feet. "We're going to give them something they can't ignore," Elias continued. "And then we're going to disappear into the chaos." Rhea raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly are you planning to do?" Elias's eyes glinted with determination. "I'm going to make sure the whole city knows we're here." Without waiting for a response, he stepped into the middle of the street. The others hesitated, glancing nervously at each other. But Elias's movements were deliberate. He had no time for doubt. The drones above were scanning, and he could feel their mechanical eyes tracing every step he took. He extended his arms, just as he had before, but this time he wasn't just drawing from his own energy. He reached deeper, into the earth beneath him, the veins of power that ran through the very foundation of the planet. His mind reached out, fingers grasping at the air, pulling the world to his will. The ground trembled. The air around him cracked like a storm, the wind picking up as his focus sharpened. His body hummed with raw energy, the power swirling through his veins as though it had been waiting for this moment. He wasn't just manipulating the energy now, he was commanding it. A brilliant flash of light exploded from Elias's chest, sending a shockwave of power through the street. The nearby Imperial drones veered away, their sensors going haywire as they tried to regain control. A massive shockwave reverberated through the city, rattling windows, shaking the very streets beneath their feet. "What the hell did you do?" Rhea shouted, stumbling backward from the force of the blast. Elias's chest heaved with exertion, but he stood tall, unwavering. "I just made sure every Imperial in this city knows we're here." The street around them lit up with an explosion of color, lights flickering, electric grids bursting to life, and a thunderous rumble as the ground beneath them split. The chaos was immediate. The drones above began to spiral out of control, unable to function under the electromagnetic pulse Elias had unleashed. Buildings shook and the skies darkened, as if the very city itself was reacting to the disturbance. From the rooftops, Elias could see the first signs of Imperial forces mobilizing, but they were too late. The chaos he created had spread like wildfire, cutting through the city's surveillance network and scrambling their communications. The Empire's grip on the capital was weakening, just for a moment, but it was enough. "Now," Elias barked, "we move." They sprinted through the disorienting maelstrom of flashing lights, exploding power stations, and shifting drones. The city was in chaos, the Empire scrambling to reassert control, and Elias knew that this moment of confusion was their chance. But the question remained, how long would they be able to keep the Empire distracted? How long before they came back stronger than ever? "Are you okay?" Rhea asked, her voice full of concern as she caught up to him. "I'm fine," Elias said, but there was a glint in his eyes, something darker than before. The power he had unlocked was intoxicating, and he knew this was just the beginning. The data they carried would shift the balance of power. Humanity had always been more than the Empire had let on, and now they had the weapon to prove it. They turned a corner, disappearing into the shadows of a crumbling underpass. But even as they fled, Elias could feel the weight of what they had started. The Empire wouldn't let go easily, but they had made their first strike, and the rebellion had just ignited. The underground tunnel stretched ahead, dimly lit by flickering lights, but to Elias, they felt more like a lifeline than a prison. The immediate chaos of the city above was behind them, but the storm was far from over. They had only one chance left to ignite the fire of rebellion in the hearts of humanity. The data Rhea had secured from the Imperial facility wasn't just a map to a weapon. It was a manifesto, a call to arms that would change everything. As the team moved through the tunnels, the sounds of distant explosions reverberated above, marking the Empire's retaliatory response. But Elias wasn't worried about their next move. What worried him was the same thing that had been gnawing at him since they first discovered the truth. What happened when the rest of the galaxy found out? "Elias," Rhea said, her voice soft but urgent. "You know what this means, right? The Empire will be hunting us down." "Sure, but they'll come after anyone who even thinks about standing with us. You just gave them a reason to burn the galaxy to the ground." Elias nodded, his face set in grim determination. "I know, but the galaxy's already burning. The Empire just hasn't realized it yet." Marcus, walking a few paces behind them, turned his head slightly. "So, what's next? We take this fight to the Empire's doorstep." "Not yet," Elias said, a slight shake of his head. "We build something first. The rebellion isn't just about blowing up Imperial bases or stealing their weapons. It's about waking up humanity. We need to show them they're not the weak, oppressed species the Empire says they are." He glanced back at his team, the weight of his words sinking in. "We need to awaken that power in all of them, not just in us. If we can do that, if we can show the galaxy what humanity is capable of, then the Empire's days are numbered." Rhea's eyes sparkled with realization. "You mean you want to start a revolution? A real one?" "Exactly." Elias smiled, but it wasn't a smile of joy. It was the smile of someone who had made a decision, who had finally understood the scale of what they had to do. The Empire won't crumble until humanity realizes its own strength. We need to spread the truth, to bring people together. The weapon we found isn't just a physical thing. It's a symbol, a catalyst. "What about the Empire?" Marcus asked. "The Empire won't let us leave this planet alive, much less spread this revolution. They'll crush every single one of us." Elias's jaw tightened. He had seen the Empire's brutality firsthand. He had lived through the scars of their oppression. But now he was no longer afraid of them. He wasn't afraid of anything. "We'll fight them," Elias said, his voice unwavering. "We'll fight until they understand that we're no longer their slaves. We'll fight until they realize humanity's true strength." The team stopped for a brief moment to catch their breath and to organize their next steps. Rhea passed Elias the encrypted drive containing the stolen data, and as he held it in his hands, he realized how much it represented. The rebellion had started with just a handful of rebels, with a single human willing to challenge the Empire's grip on the galaxy. Now they had something far more powerful, a truth that could unite entire star systems. "This is our future," Elias said, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. "We take this data, and we send it to every corner of the galaxy. We awaken humanity's lost potential, and we remind the Empire why they should have feared us in the first place." A rumbling sound echoed from above, followed by the telltale hum of an Imperial hovercraft. The team tensed, preparing for what was to come. But Elias raised his hand, signaling them to hold position. "Let them come," he said with a dark grin. We've been living in the shadows for too long. It's time to step into the light. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. But Elias didn't flinch. The first wave of Imperial enforcers was about to make their move, but Elias knew they had one advantage: surprise. With the power of the weapon they had discovered, and the fire of humanity's rebellion at their backs, they could do anything. The lights in the tunnels flickered once more as the team readied themselves for the final confrontation, and as Elias turned his gaze upward, toward the darkened skies above,